Well, that's a really good question because in the grand scheme of things, farms in New York really can't survive without immigrant workers. So they are a very large piece of the puzzle, if you will. Depending on the farm, of course, depending on the industry, might determine what percentage of your farm workers are American-born citizens versus immigrants. But it's fair to say that a vast majority of farms in New York State have at least some form of immigrant labor. So what we're concerned with here at Farm Bureau is trying to create a year-round H2A visa program. That is the seasonal guest worker program. We want this to be, rather than seasonal, we want it to be year-round because, let's face it, a farm like a dairy is not a seasonal business. It is 24/7 and, it really is 365 days a year. So
So right now, so that means right now there really aren't carve outs for, I guess, specific aspects of the product.
that
It is seasonal.
That's correct. And, we can also argue we've been asking for this for decades. The H2A visa program has not been really updated in 30 or 40 years. So it's really time for an upgrade here, and that's what we're fighting for.
Why does it need updating so much? I guess why has it been a something that's been on your docket now for this long?
It has, and that's because, like I said earlier, immigrant workers are just, part of the fabric of farming here in New York. We really can't do without them. And yet, as much as you might hear these rumors of immigrant workers are stealing our jobs, I can tell you for a fact that people are not lining up for these jobs. It's not like there's an extra store of people happily lining up to take these jobs. In fact, we have some pretty aggressive hiring campaigns going on in certain parts of the state, and they still can't fill the jobs. So we need these laborers.
Yeah. I guess if you look at it, if this is enforced on a greater scale, if you will, if you want to call it that, what is the impact on the farms themselves and the rest of the chain, if you will, in the state?
It is a chain. It's like a domino effect. So if we continue pressing, like this and squeezing out immigrant workers, first of all, they're not going to even want to come here. They'll go to other countries instead. But that aside, the fewer workers we have on a farm, the less the job can get done. So if you have those cows need to be milked regardless. So what's going to happen is, we already have not enough dairy cows to fill demand in this state. I'm just giving you the one example here with dairy. But if this were to continue, we'll have fewer cows and therefore your prices are going to go up in the grocery store. That is one effect of this across the board, is that if we don't have immigrant workers here to help us, we won't get the work done and the prices will go up. And some farms might even be forced to close.
Wow. What are you hearing from farms right now when it comes to this? Do they have a lot of questions? What are their concerns?
They definitely have a lot of concerns. And sort of like the situation we're seeing with tariffs here is that we need a more definitive path of action here. We keep hearing maybe this is going to happen and maybe that's going to happen. It's the uncertainty that's the hardest part. So every day farmers wake up, you've got natural uncertainty like weather, for example, and we've had pretty terrible weather this spring and summer. So you've already got that issue going on. You've got lack of workers. Now you've got tariffs on top of that. So what is already a razor thin margin for farmers is just getting thinner and thinner.
I know that there's been, I've spoken with several immigration attorneys at this point. Is there also an educational aspect for, these owners, these farmers that maybe there's more that they need to know to make sure they're in okay shape or that their workers are doing what they're supposed to? I guess, where does that fall? And what's your message to them in that way?
Sure. I mean, there's always education for any occupation. We encourage that. But at the same time, we find our farmers, our members are doing all the things they're supposed to do. They are educated. They are receiving the proper paperwork. If someone produces, you hear stories of someone producing false paperwork. It's not the farmer's job to determine what is real and what is false. I don't even believe that's legal to ask. So if the paperwork is presented and everything looks to be in good shape and they're doing all the things they're supposed to be doing, that's a pretty tough call there for farmers to make. But as I said, our farmers are doing the right thing and they are educated. So we need these workers.
And I think you mentioned this to the Times Union that I believe that was you that talked about the person impact of this, right? I mean, the workers are there, and then, sometimes they'll bring their families, or they are a part of these communities too at the same time, right? These are farming communities as a whole. I grew up near one. You know what I mean? Like I feel like
Exactly.
an aspect of this, right?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. So when you hear about a raid on a farm, and let me just clarify there too, that of course, if there's a valid reason and a violent felon is removed from a farm, there is no one on this planet who would disagree that that person should be taken away from the farm. That's not the issue here. The issue is when we have this quote unquote collateral damage, when we have entire families or entire farm staffs taken away. I mean, these are kids who go to school. These are parents who pay taxes. They're hardworking citizens here doing a job and making ends meet like the rest of us. So it's just, it's really causing a lot of trauma, and not just for the family that's, in some cases deported, but for the employer. I mean, these are family members. In some cases, they come back to the same farm for 10, 20 years.
And you referenced just a moment ago, actually, before I get to that, I did want to bring up the Sackett's Harbor, right? That was, I guess, an example of this, right? At the end of the day, I think a lot of people saw that, and you had, people on both sides of the aisle saying that this had a real impact, not just on the people, but the farm and the community, right? That seemed like it was really the example of what we're talking about.
That's right. And, when the pressure was applied, it turned out that they really were not taken for a valid reason, with the exception of, we are not privy to the legal ramifications of these raids. So I can't say if there was someone there legitimately, illegally or not, in which case they should be removed from the farm. But when you have school children taken away, mothers taken away for what appears, at least on the surface, to be no valid reason, that's a pretty tough call. And yes, in that case and in many other cases, the families are eventually returned, but that doesn't mean everything's perfect and happy. These are children that were ripped away from their families, so that can cause some long-term damage and trauma.
Yeah, for sure, especially if they're trying to grow up in that area, right, at the end of the day, and
Exactly.
safe and healthy and everything around that. You did touch on, and I want to get to, well, just a little bit deeper on the marketing campaigns and the outreach and the recruitment for workers. And you said across the board, it's one of the, would you say it's one of the challenges, even in the midst of all of this right now, is trying to get people to come on and work? I guess what's
Oh,
that?
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there are many industries that are difficult. This is a hands-on, labor-intensive job. It's not one that's easy to fill. So when you're talking about, oh, it's okay if these people get taken away, or maybe they decide not to come here, we'll have no problem filling these jobs. That's notoriously not been the case. Even in areas where there are high unemployment numbers, for example, you might think, oh, this is a perfect opportunity. But for whatever reason, I don't have the answers here, but for whatever reason, the jobs are not easy to fill.
Yeah, and I know the Trump administration has said, an all-American workforce is the goal. Do you think that's realistic?
I don't think that's realistic for the farm, maybe for some industries, but and listen, no one here it's not anti-American to say that we need immigrant workers on our farms. Immigrant workers, I mean, immigration is the fabric of America, as you know. Most of us here certainly can't claim we're 100% American. We all have immigrant roots in some way, shape, or form. So, to have that goal might be noble in some people's minds. And maybe if there was this massive workforce that was ready to take over, that might be one thing. But that is, in my mind, that's not a realistic goal, not for farming.
Finally, your message to the farmers, I guess, what do you want to see moving forward here? I think obviously the year-round visa is a big part of that, right?
Right. I mean, for farmers, and I think they would all agree here, like I said, nobody wants any violent criminals working on their farm. But if and you said education is part of it, absolutely. If we can provide this year-round H2A program, it will open the door. It will actually make things easier because the paperwork will be easier to fill out. That's another thing, farmers, I think most people don't realize how much paperwork goes on the daily for farmers. So, you're already getting up at the crack of dawn, planting, harvesting, whatever it is you might be doing. And then there's just a ton of paperwork on top of all that. If we had a year-round H2A visa program with clear guide rules and clear expectations on both sides, it would make their lives, I don't want to say a lot easier, but certainly easier.
Yeah. All right. Amanda, thank you so much.
Of course. Thanks for having me.